Hello and welcome back to the Bird's Eye View podcast. We are here on Tuesday, May 28th. I'm your host, Zach Worden, joined as always by Jori Negin-Shecter. And Jori, let's get the show started with some good news. Angel Hernandez is officially retired. How are we feeling about Angel Hernandez? We're not even going to talk about the Blue Jays.
I don't think the Blue Jays even need to be mentioned in this episode because this entire episode will be dedicated to the worst umpire to grace the face of the earth, Angel Hernandez. Thank you for your service. So long. See you later.
I will give Angel Hernandez some credit. As bad as he was at an umpire, he was at least the most polarizing figure among umpires in the league. And I mean, I don't know if that's a good thing. Like it's probably a bad thing, but it gave a lot of people stuff to talk about. So good for him for maybe being the most well-known umpire outside of Joe West in baseball history.
I would say it's kind of like in hockey where you don't want to know your defenseman's name. I can name Angel Hernandez. I can name CB Buckner. I can name the other recent retiree, Joe West. I don't know how many others I can name, and I'd like to keep it that way. And I'm sure ABS, as that comes along, will certainly expedite that process.
You know, is it a hot take to be like bring back umpire personalities in baseball?
Well, I think you can find a happy middle.
I would probably rather just not notice the umpires in a game, but of course baseball, the sport where you're going to notice them the most because they're involved in every single pitch. So okay. All joking aside, we are going to talk about the Blue Jays today. What a team, man. What a team they are. We talked last week as they began this stretch against some lesser competition. They took 2 of 3 from the White Sox, only being beat by Garrett Crochet, which sure, I guess. And then they start things off well in Detroit with the 9-1 win, and then crap hits the fan, and they lose the next 3 before winning again last night against Chicago. But the 3 straight losses to Detroit, like that was a pretty bad stretch. I know we had said last week that they needed to go 9-4 over their next I guess it would be 13 games to kind of like save the season, and they obviously did not. They are well, I guess they still have the chance to. They're what are they, 4-4 right now, so they got to go 5-0 over their next 5 against the White Sox and Tigers.
Yeah, they're gonna have to sweep. It's it's the White Sox, so maybe I wouldn't put that quite past them as far as I guess possibilities. But yeah, we went into this stretch kind of saying that this was where they had to turn the season around. It was White Sox, Tigers, White Sox, Pirates, and they did not look the part against the Detroit Tigers. They got twisted into fits by Reese Olson. Of course, the bullpen falls apart. That was on Sunday. And then yesterday, they do come to life against the White Sox. But again, it's the White Sox. So you can only play who's ahead of you. But this certainly is the stretch where they are supposed to be imposing their will. And they have not done that. Now, as far as the remainder of this stretch, as we said, I mean, the White Sox plausibly could sweep the Pirates. You could plausibly sweep, but for a stretch that we had said that they got to get back to 500 in this stretch, they got to get close. They've used up all of their losses, so they're going to have to really get hot and fast.
Let's talk about the Sunday game, because I think that's the most interesting game in their recent stretch, where Yusei Kikuchi gets hit hard for like the first time this year and ends up leaving that game early. And then it seems like the vibes were looking to take a switch after that. You know, the offense shows up, puts up 11 runs after falling down 5-0 after, of course, Yusei gets pulled. And then the bullpen, including Jimmy Garcia for the first time this year, and then Jordan Romano again, totally implodes in the last 2 innings and costs them a series split there. I mean, they got home runs from Kevin Biggio, a home run from Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, the big home run from Dalton Varsho to give them the lead. And all of that just kind of goes into thin air. I mean, from that game, like that was, I know like Jeff Passan tweeted out the encapsulation or in
Encapsulates. Yeah, yeah.
thank you, of the Toronto Blue Jays season in one wretched box score. And I mean, I totally disagree. I don't think that that was a representation of the Blue Jays season at all, because
It's
they
almost the
scored 11
opposite.
runs. They scored 11 runs, right? But I mean, how did you feel about that game? Because I think that one was like it went from awful with Kikuchi to the offense saving the day to the bullpen giving it away.
Well, I would say that even though it's not necessarily an encapsulation in terms of maybe the actual contents of the game, it's really this case of the Blue Jays, excuse me, this case of the Blue Jays just not being able to muster up what they need when they need it. Now, some of that is maybe sequencing, and some of that is poor luck, but just the bullpen, which had been such a dynamic part of this team in stretches, and not even, the bullpen's been bad. Like, we're not gonna pretend that it's been good, but a guy like a Jimmy Garcia, a guy like a Jordan Romano, had their ups and downs, but especially in the case of Garcia, have been everything you could possibly kind of ask for. And then, of course, offensively, it's been the exact opposite. Now, Vlad had a huge game. He had 4 hits, looked really great. Varsho has continued to kind of be this player that we almost talked about at the beginning of the year, where he could be kind of a 4 or 5 win player based on the defensive floor. And if he can just turn his bat into something compelling, right? So there's parts of, again, that game even where you're kind of like grasping. You can almost see exactly what you like about this team. But then, of course, every pitcher gives up a run except for Eric Swanson in that outing, and they can't slam the door. And of course, Matt Vierling promptly ends it with a 3-run shot. So, I mean, it's kind of just what else can you really say other than just this team finds ways to not kind of get it done.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing after that one is kind of where you once again you fall to 6 games under 500, where they were at entering the White Sox series, and their playoff odds drop to around 15%, so, according to Fangraphs. And it's May. Yes, it's still May. It's about to be June. And if you really like, I understand, like, we kind of talked about this before we hit record, like the front office or front offices across baseball are like way too smart to like give up on a season on May 27th, on May 28th kind of thing. But at the same time, like, they're approaching the territory where you really do have to consider what the future of this team is and what the long-term impact is of like holding it together for as long as you can.
I mean, we're basically at the halfway point. We're slightly after that halfway point of what we have kind of deemed this must win, this stretch to save the season, right? And right now, I'm not seeing a whole lot in terms of reason to believe that the season that is currently on life support is going to get saved. Um, I think that for the Blue Jays to come out of this stretch basically anything short of that 9-4 record, I don't see how you can go into June and even into July and supplement the core. Listen, to win, it was an article from BNS. I believe it was at the conclusion of that, 14-11 master stroke, that they have to play at close to like a 90 win pace to win about 84, which was the fewest number of wins that made the playoffs last year. And I think they have to play at like a 96 or 97 win pace to match last year's total. So the room for error, the margin for error has gone from relatively wide. It has shrunk and it has shrunk. And right now it's about as thin as it's going to get. And you're kind of at this stage almost, it's almost June 1st. You're kind of eyeing up the trade deadline and you're kind of eyeing up July, because that month right now, you've got a month to basically decide whether you're tearing it down or you're rebuilding.
Yeah, I think going back to Like what you talked about, like with where they need to play at like a 90 win pace to win 84. Like 84 games or isn't going to get it done. Like if we're being honest, like they have the Yankee. How many teams they have ahead of them, right? Like they have the Yankees ahead of them, the Guardians ahead of them, the Mariners ahead of them, Baltimore, Kansas City, Minnesota, Boston, Detroit, Tampa Bay, Texas. All those teams are ahead of them, and Houston is right behind them. And Houston is playing a lot better as of late. So you not only have to pass like all of those teams, but you have to like play better than them, right? Like you have to play much better than all of them because obviously you don't get like you get the head-to-head games against Tampa Bay and Boston and Baltimore and New York, which none of those are going to be easy games, but especially as you kind of go into the second half of the year, right, where teams have either loaded up at the trade deadline and how many teams that are ahead of the Blue Jays right now are going to look to be buyers at the trade deadline. Like I would say the Yankees will be buyers, Cleveland will be buyers, Seattle will be buyers, Baltimore, Kansas City, Minnesota. I would say like the teams that I could see maybe not being buyers that are ahead of them are maybe Detroit because I don't think Detroit is that good. I know that
Dismantled.
they just took 3 or 4 from the Jays, which is not where you want to be, and Tampa Bay, who is kind of on the Jays level of like um falling below expectations, but also they might be getting like Shane Baz and Jeffrey Springs have been pitching in the minors, so like maybe they're due to improve going forward as well. So I think that there's like not an easy path. I know that you can look at the J schedule and they've had like the a top 5 hardest schedule in baseball, but also going forward, they have a top 3 hardest schedule in baseball remaining. So it's not like the road is going to get easier for them. And it's just tough to look at it and see the way that they've played and think that that is one conducive to a long sustained stretch of 90 win play and two conducive to actually doing something if you were to find your way into the playoffs.
Well, I mean, you can look at it as simple as this. The Blue Jays right now have a minus 34 run differential. The only teams that are behind them are the minus 36 Los Angeles Angels, the minus 47 Tampa Bay Rays, the minus 63 Oakland Athletics, and the minus 120 whole level of ineptitude worse Chicago White Sox. Now, the Blue Jays, of course, are facing the White Sox at the moment, and I'm just double checking, but the Pirates are right in the Blue Jays neighborhood at a minus 29, still ahead of them, and of course in the National League. But again, this is why we're talking about teams that you should and can be competing with and beating if you're better than them. Now, it's the part of the schedule they're supposed to be winning ball games in, so that run differential could change dramatically within the next week. But I think it's very telling that the teams in your neighborhood in the American League are teams that are in the deep throes of rebuilds, or the Tampa Bay Rays, who right now are busted and broken beyond repair.
Yeah, I think Chris Bassett was on the Chris Rose rotation podcast yesterday, or I guess he was on it during the Tiger series, but they released it yesterday, and he was kind of saying, like we can make a lot of excuses about why we've been bad, but realistically, everybody can make those excuses, right? Like the scheduling, the injuries, like all that, like everybody can make those excuses. And I think it was pretty interesting what he said because he pointed to like the internal pressure forcing guys to try and be way better than they are or need to try. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on it. Like I'm gonna pull up the quote here, but what are your thoughts on like the guys on the team like almost trying too hard to be like MVPs, all stars, like kind of that type of
But
player.
that's been a pervasive theme with this team forever. It's kind of a maturity thing. And the name that immediately springs to mind, I'm sure it's similar with you. Forever, it was this Vlad wants to be the hero mentality. And ironically, he's really, in a lot of respects, not been the problem. He's his average is up over 300. He's got about a 130-ish OPS plus. I'm sure his WRC plus is right in that neighborhood as well. So to me, I don't even know that it's a case of, guys trying too hard and getting kind of fed their lunch. Maybe on the pitching side, I mean, I could see, I could see that being the case, but not not in the same way that it's even really been in previous seasons.
Yeah, so here's the quote from Bassett. He said, "I just think the reality is that too many guys showed up this year and they put way too much pressure on themselves to be the very, very best they can be. They basically came into the season and said, 'Listen, the only way for us to be great this year is for me to be the best I possibly can be.'"
But that's a crazy, like, can you, if that's the mentality in the clubhouse for them running it back, that's a very telling quote.
Well, I mean, I think, right? Like the way that the front office changed this team in the offseason is realistically that they didn't change the team this offseason, right? So they bet on the internal improvements. And so that puts the pressure on those guys to internally improve. And so Bassett went on from there to say, I look at a guy like Bo Bichette, I look at Vladdy, I look at Gossman, me, I look at certain guys that are really struggling throughout the year, and I'm like, the only way to be great is to keep on adding good days in a row. I think we fell into a trap where we were trying to add up great days in a row.
That's like, I think that's the most telling quote you're gonna hear from this Blue Jays core. It's about as transparent as it's gonna get.
Yeah. I mean, like, yeah, like if that was the feeling is where they're kind of in the clubhouse and they're all like, I need to do better, I need to do better. And then they like start pushing. And he did go on to say like that he felt like it's been better and that they're playing a little bit more free. But I think that those quotes are pretty illuminating to the fact that yeah, like they didn't change the team enough to where you're taking pressure off of your main guys. Like all of those guys are obviously pressing to be better because they feel like there's not enough around them to be like a great team.
Last year, we talked a lot about floor raisers and ceiling raisers. And all of last year, I think, all of last year, I think what we kind of were talking about was that the floor raisers weren't basically doing their job, and that a lot of the ceiling raisers, obviously, like the ceiling raisers had kind of done their part in some respects. You look at a guy like maybe Vlad was underperforming, and maybe a guy like Springer was underperforming, but I think by and large there was a certain level of content, especially on the pitching side. This year, I feel like it's kind of almost been the opposite, where the again, just the margins have been where this team has, or the stars in a lot of respects, especially of late, have largely been good enough. I don't even know if I would include Springer in that at this point, because Vlad's been good enough, and I think that Bo's had a really good stretch of late. And even like Gosman has turned in a couple nice starts. Kikuchi had a one rough start, but he's been pretty good this year, right? Like there's a lot of positives to take away. But then you look at like the bullpen just the other day, totally imploding. So it's again, it's really tough to almost get a read on this team, right? Because when it's one thing, it's another thing. It's kind of whack-a-mole with this team and why things have gone sour of late.
Yeah, I mean, for you, like just kind of looking at the team, I mean, obviously the offense has not been even to the point where it was last year, but it's improving a little bit. But the pitching, of course, like it was always going to be tough for them to repeat the level that they reached last season because last season they were one of the best pitching staffs in baseball. Relievers are notoriously volatile. We know that. And the starting rotation had a bunch of older pitchers in it. So expecting them to maintain that level of success while expecting the offense to drastically improve what it did last season. Well, I mean, like we're just beating a dead horse at this point. Like we've talked about this all, right? And it's like, how is that where like is it really shocking that this is the results where the offense has underperformed and the pitching? I mean, it's a little shocking how bad the pitching has been, I'll say that. But is it shocking that the pitching regressed while the offense has failed to level up?
Well, it's really a case of that there was internal kind of baking in that, you know, the offense improving was going to have to not only catch up to whatever regression you saw from the pitching, but then it was going to have to and then some on top of that, and that's just not what has happened.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at it too, like, Kevin Kiermaier has an 80 WRC plus. George Springer has a 67, and we can have like the George Springer conversation if you want, because they're like we didn't do the leadoff thing because again like it was kind of more, I think, just like a matter of time before they had to move him from that spot. But are you concerned about like where, like, because honestly the supporting cast has been like okay for Springer, Vlad, and Bo, where Varsho has been, I don't want to say borderline great this year, but he has been very good. He has.
He's improved drastic. No, it's really a case of kind of like, Varsho gets better, Springer gets worse. So it's you're not even really like adding almost to the offense, right? You're kind
Yeah,
of just you're scrambling and getting it from different sources.
yeah, and I mean, like, on Springer specifically, like, are you concerned about what it looks like for him the rest of the season, or do you have like some faith that there might be something to come from him?
Man, I wish I had an answer. Like I just don't really know where you pull positives from with him, because it's been the same talking point of kind of a regression from last year, which already on top of that was a regression. And beyond that, you've also got this problem where his process has drastically gotten worse too. So is there a solution there even? I don't really know. I mean, it's kind of tough when a guy that you've dedicated a substantial portion of your payroll to has suddenly become such a substantial albatross. Like, are we talking like Albert Pujols level of albatross here? Not yet, but I mean, you might be getting into that territory.
Yeah, he's like, obviously last night is a nice step where he hits the early home run. He goes 2 for 3 with a walk. But again, like, I'm struggling to the point where like we saw them perform fairly well against the White Sox last week and kind of have the offense like perform okay in Detroit, where they put up 9 runs in the win and then 11 runs in the Sunday game, but they only put up 2 and 1 on the Friday and the Saturday.
It's a Jekyll and Hyde situation, and
Yeah.
that's part of the problem too. Is that you can't get them to line up right, and part of that is what it is. You can't control some of that, but it's just an inability to just execute.
Yeah. I mean, dude, like I'm struggling with the White Sox stuff because the White Sox are so bad. Like, they are probably one of the worst baseball teams that we've seen in the past like 20 years. Like, I know the A's have been really bad, but this White Sox team is really, really, really bad. And if they go out and sweep the White Sox and then say that they take 2 or 3 from the Pirates, right? Like, so they end up with this stretch with an 8-5 record, which again isn't great, but at least it kind of like keeps you in the range of at least being able to like see a competitive team. But how much does that like really tell you about this team going forward? Like, does it even really matter that I mean, of course it matters when you beat the bad teams, the teams that you're supposed to, but does it matter in terms of the grand scheme of this team wanting to be a playoff contender, that they can only beat bad teams or can only perform above average against bad teams?
I think that second point is the more telling one. Is the that it's the above average play is against these bad teams. Now, I also think that there's opportunities to hit the reset button. Like, you've got this is the last podcast we will be recording before June 1st, right? It'll be another month. You'll turn the calendar next month and everyone kind of starts fresh to a certain degree, right? So if they can take this stretch and convert some of that positive momentum into beating like better teams, that would be great. I don't know how much faith I'd have in that happening, but you have to start somewhere before you can even get to the discussion of, is this a team that can compete for a wild card? Because right now this is a team that's going to end up in the lottery mix. And you're right now trying to get yourself to the point where you are in a competitive window and you are winning baseball games. And right now, this team doesn't look like they can do that. Now, if they can beat some of these bad teams and turn that into wins against better teams, then you start to believe. But for now, it's tough to see.
Yeah, I that's the part where like kind of reconciling where they need to like start playing better first before they can beat good teams. And like I guess that's in theory what you wanted from this stretch, right? Like you wanted to start playing better against the Chicagos and the Detroits and the Pittsburghs before you get to Baltimore and Milwaukee and Cleveland in June. So it's interesting, and I mean, of course, like we would like them to start playing better in the next week and go into that series against the Orioles with a little bit of momentum and feeling themselves a little bit at the plate and having vibes shifted a little bit. But I think as the Detroit series shows us, where you can kind of have that and have the vibes rolling a bit, but baseball doesn't always go your way. So it'll be interesting. I mean, again, like they catch a break like against Chicago this week. You don't get Crochet, you don't get Fetty, and then against Pittsburgh where you don't get Skeens and you don't get Jones. But that doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to beat those teams.
Yeah, you can't pencil in W's, especially given the state of the Blue Jays
Yeah.
themselves, right?
Let's move on because I think the on-field stuff is all it is what it is, but some of the on-field or off-field stuff is a little interesting. They decide to bring back the home run jacket. And as I said in our group chat, whoever decided to bring it back for the White Sox series is a genius
They knew what they were
because
doing.
because if they had brought it back in a series where they don't hit any home runs, I would be interested to know if which game that they planned on bringing it back because they hit some home runs in the 5-1 win against or sorry, in the 9-3 win on the Monday against the White Sox. And then the Tuesday game against Crochet, they get shut out. So did they have the home run jacket waiting on the Tuesday, or was it planned for the Wednesday game to bring that back?
Could you imagine if on the Tuesday they've kept it all nice and quiet? They've been very secretive about it. It's none of the media knows anything about the home run jacket potentially making its way back, and they bring it out Tuesday, and it's all exciting, and all the players are kind of like, "Oh, we got a big surprise," and then just nothing happens. Can you imagine if that's the spot they put themselves in?
I mean, so I'll give them credit for bringing it back against the White Sox, but if they bring it back for the game against Garrett Crochet, then I take it back. Then that
And
was
it's
just a
funny
bad
too, because
idea.
it's not like this team doesn't know their offensive woes against, capable pitchers, right? So
Yeah.
they're like, yes, Garrett Crochet, that's who we're breaking out the home run jacket against. That's what's happening.
Was the Crochet game was the John Schneider cap tip game, right? The tip your
Yes,
cap.
yes,
Yeah. Do
yes,
you
which
have any
was
thoughts on
just
that?
uh, like, is he wrong? Because like, no, it's Garrett Crochet, but also like, don't say that. Don't go out there and be like, we sucked today. Hat tip to you. That's just for all the bad PR that this Blue Jays core has really dealt with. That's just asking. That's a lobbing a softball at anybody and everybody to pick it apart and scrutinize.
Yeah, the cap tip thing, I'm like, well, you see, here's the thing is that if you want to be a good team, you're gonna have to get runs off of good pitchers eventually, right? So if you just tip your cap every time there's a good pitcher, then you're probably not a very good team,
Then you won't be wearing your hat very much. I'll say that.
especially playing in the AL East.
Yeah, it's not a great look. Listen, like I think a lot of stuff that John Schneider says gets really picked apart. And listen, that's the nature of the business. A little inside baseball, as Blake Murphy likes to say. Of course, you're going to analyze everything the manager says, but don't give them such an obvious quote like that. Please, I'm begging you.
Oh man, I don't know. It's interesting time. And again, like we kind of talked about this with Ross Atkins and his availabilities, but like sometimes it's like, what are you gonna say? You're like, well, he's a good pitcher, and we didn't score any runs off him. Like whoop de doo, like baseball. It's gonna happen how many times does a good pitcher shut down an offense in an MLB season across the league?
Dozens of times,
I would
dozens of
like
times.
probably a
But
thousand.
with that said, it's still like Garrett Crochet has been great this year. I'm not going to take away from the type of season that he's turned himself in a lot of respects into the ace of the White Sox, the future ace of the White Sox, living up to all of his draft billing and everything like that. But it's still Garrett Crochet. This guy does not have the track record for you to be getting pantsed like that.
Yes, it like the at bats were really uncompetitive in that game too. I think is the key, and they didn't really. I mean, looking back at like Ross Atkins, where his one of his quotes was like, like we get into good counts, blah blah blah. Like that's one of the encouraging things. Like they didn't do that against Crochet. So again, like it's just not one of those things where you can be like, yeah, he was really good, but also we were really bad. So what are you gonna do?
You're gonna tip your cap.
All right. Speaking of caps, the Blue Jays City Connect jerseys and hats have allegedly leaked,
Allegedly,
but there's also some stuff out there that they might not be the real ones. And the Blue Jays social accounts have been really hammering home the purple. And this jersey did not have any purple, but it did have the skyline. And I don't want to get like immediate reactions because I think we're gonna do a reaction episode to the jersey itself. But I'm curious how are you feeling about City Connect Gate? We'll call it.
I don't know. This is such an interesting. I can't tell if they're trying to save face. It's kind of like if this is the like a PR move to release it, and they're releasing it 2 days before the official release. You said it yourself. They're a little bit late to that. They kind of missed the boat on maybe making some changes, unless they have like an alternate version of the jersey or something. Because the reception, I tweeted something out, just a brief poll, and only got 2 dozen responses. But the reception was not very good, and I mean, Twitter basically matched that type of response. Now, I mean, we'll talk obviously in a couple of days once they're officially released in terms of our thoughts on the jerseys. I think I'm a little bit more positive on them than maybe you are, and we will surely get into that in an episode to come. But I mean, like, they're also the City Connects. Like, these things have been everything from the beautiful Washington Nationals pink to the garbage that the Detroit Tigers put out that said Motor City, and every Detroit alternate jersey says Motor City. It was the least creative thing of all time. So what are we hoping for here anyways?
Raccoons, purple raccoons. No, it'll be interesting. Like I tweeted out, like I'm interested to see the pants because obviously all the City Connect pants have kind of traditionally matched the jersey. So are the Blue Jays about to be rocking black pants out there? Like that would be interesting, and I'm very intrigued.
Go full Vandy, eh? Go full Vandy.
Yes. I'm also interested. I tweeted this out like a while back, but Nike has like the five jersey rule, I believe, and you can
The
have
4+1.
the 4+1, and
Where
the plus one is the City Connect. And I wonder if the Jays have received the exception for the red jersey as it just being a 1 day special event jersey, because the Jays like traditionally have worn their red jerseys more than just once. But based on this Nike rule that is dumb, they might only be able to wear it once.
Well, like, we haven't seen it yet this year. They just got that shipment of the baby blues in, which is a whole different discussion as it is with regards to Fanatics and Nike. But I also don't like. Well, here's the thing: is that a lot of hypotheses were that the City Connect was going to be replacing the Canada Day jersey, and they would wear it on Canada Day. And if this is the if this is the City Connect, this is not going to be the Canada Day jersey. So
No.
what's the plan with the Canada Day jerseys? Is that just not going to happen this year?
I, I'm assuming that they have the exemption for it, and that it'll just be their Canada Day thing, unless they do come out with a
Well,
very
if
different
they
looking City Connect.
if they don't have a Canada Day jersey, like public backlash, I'm sure would be
A lot
because
of people
it's
hate the
always
Reds, though.
people don't like the Reds, but it's also like a thing they do every year on July 1st,
Do
right? Like
you do you
July.
do you like the look of the red jerseys?
I'm not an everyday red guy. I think that the red jersey should be reserved for Canada Day. But I mean, listen, like even on a nostalgia level, right? Like I think there's a lot of nostalgia attached to the Blue Jays wearing red on Canada Day, even if it's just the nameplate or the front plate with the logo and not just in full red garb. So I would be just genuinely shocked, and I'm sure that the front office is going to be the ones that feel the backlash if they don't bring back a red jersey for Canada Day.
I'll say I know that like a lot of people don't like them because they play bad in them, but I actually like how the red jerseys look. So like that might be my hot take, but I don't know. I don't dislike how they look.
A lot of jersey taste from this guy because you were the City Connect guy.
I mean, I'm interested to see if they do end up going with purple. And like, I mean, it's funny because on Twitter, like I've seen like people who probably would know saying that the leak is them, and people who also would know saying that the leak isn't them. So who knows? Like I saw somebody saying that like the purple teaser is because it's a combination of the red and blue on the sleeves.
Like I
But
don't
you
know.
can't
That's
tease
so
purple and then
silly.
not
That's
give purple.
that would be just silly. That would be just silly. And I also think that a purple jersey would have been fun.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really think that would have been a bad jersey to begin with. I really don't know. I'm more on the if this is the City Connects, I think they did okay, and we'll get into why.
Yes.
But I don't see how this can't be done.
Yeah. We'll get into it on Friday. I believe they will officially reveal them on Thursday night, and we will record Thursday morning a little reaction pod to the jersey. But unless you have anything else, I think that kind of covers it. It'll be I don't know if you want to look ahead to the rest of this week against the White Sox. Not super exciting. I think the next two games, obviously, you get Gossman tonight, and then another Manoah. How do you feel about Manoah's other start against Detroit? I guess is the one
I
thing that we can
mean,
talk about.
I guess we can kind of get into that a little bit. It was kind of just a case of Malik Manoah being Alek Manoah, right? The week to week, the day to day with him is perplexing to say the least. I mean, he goes from this unbelievable stretch of 14 innings without giving up a run, I believe it was, to whatever that was. So it's kind of like, where do you go from here with him, right? You're kind of like hoping that he's a five, maybe a four, and this is what a four or a five is going to do.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, you talk about progression isn't always linear, and especially, I don't think that his progression was going to be a roller coaster that just kept going up. I think this is probably, one of those very twisty roller coasters that goes gives you a lot of ups, a lot of downs, and Friday
And every now and
was a
again, you might
down.
get a little nauseous.
Yes, yes. So like not really overly concerned about like one bad start. I think him coming back and having two really, really good starts and one really, really bad start and one start that was not great, but also not as bad as we saw him last year, I think is probably pretty appropriate.
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty much the prognosis on him. I think it's going to be really a start to start kind of thing. And I think that the White Sox are going to be another good opportunity for a soft landing after a tough start.
Yeah, that's a really good point. If he pitched really well against the Rays and the Twins, so I have a feeling like the White Sox might be another good start for him.
Another opportunity for him to turn the page because he's
Yes.
been doing a lot of that.
Yes. A lot of improvement, a lot of maybe not improvement, but yeah, a lot of look into your next start, we'll say. And with that, that'll do it for us here today at the Bird's Eye View Podcast. Make sure you subscribe and like on YouTube. Make sure you follow and review wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow us all on Twitter. I'm at Worden_Zach. Jori is at J Negin-Shecter, and the pod is at BEV_pod. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you later this week.